Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Hello. In today's episode, I'm answering some questions asked by listeners and followers. Most of them are about my life as a healer and teacher, why I chose to study what I study, how I feel about my work, what kind of classes I'm offering. So I decided to talk about this because I think it's important to hear about personal experiences, how things came to be, and why we do what we do and how we do it. So just so you know, I love answering questions. If you want me to do some research or talk about something that maybe you don't understand that I talk about all the time, please let me know. I'm happy to do that deep dive and talk about it. I would rather you understand the concepts I'm talking about instead of me just speaking in all this spiritual woo-woo language that nobody knows. So if you have a question, just send it to me at Angie@themoonandstone.com, or you can go to my anchor.fm centered portal and you can record a question for a future episode. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Centered. Okay, Tan asked, I want to know about your courses. If you'll open for distance students, I'm dying to take a course with you. Yes, I am definitely opening courses online. So I'm reworking my mentoring circle to be more earth-based and shamanic. And it's going to be centered for online students. So it'll be a completely online course. I believe I'm going to launch it in early 2023, and I'll just start promoting it and talking about it more closer to the time that I'm launching it. But it'll be a many-month circle for people interested in learning about shamanic healing and like that personal shamanic healing journey. I'm really super excited about it. I'm planning on teaching a lot of my classes online, starting to transition as my boss, Hibiscus Moon, retires and closes the academy I've worked for since 2014. I am going to be like launching my own teaching work a little more, regularly. So I'll teach my tarot class a little more. I mean, I work a lot for Hibiscus Moon, and so I'm hoping that this will free my time up to be able to really offer my research and my teaching. So my tarot class more frequently, my mentoring circle, I plan on teaching all my crystal workshops online that I've done, and then teaching some of my magic work and my work like that I've done over the years. Plus, I'd like to do more healing circles, and offer those as like a monthly self-care thing. So that's what I'm doing.
Hey, Angie, it's Suzanne. I was just curious. During your conversation with Kira, you were talking about what year you were in terms of the tarot and your life path cards and stuff like that. And I was wondering, is that stuff that you teach in your tarot class, like how to determine what year you're in? Thank you.
Hi, Suzanne. Oh my gosh, thank you for being my first call on here. I loved it. Yes, it is something I always teach, and it's very easy to do. And I've shared it on my podcast at some point. I think I shared it, and I shared it online. So I've shared it many times. It's very easy to figure out your life path card, your card of the year. So you're adding, this is a numerology thing. So you add your month of birth, your day of birth, and your year of birth. Okay, so let me break that down for you because it can be a little confusing. So my birthday is January 4th, 1974. So if I were going to figure out my life path card, I would add all of those numbers up. So January is a 1. 1 plus 4, I'm January 4th, so that's 5. Okay, then I'm adding 1974. So 1 and 9 is 10. 7 and 11 is, or 7 and 4 is 11. So that's 21. Okay. So 21 plus 5 is 26. Okay. So now all of those digits I've added together and I've gotten 26. So we're basically looking at only the major arcana cards. So your major arcana cards are 21 cards. Okay. We're not using the Fool because the Fool is the 0 card. But let's say we're using the first 21. So if that number were to be under 21, then you would use the card that is associated with that. Now, 26 is above 21. So I add the 2 and the 6 together and I get an 8. So my life path card is Strength, the 8 card of the major arcana. Now for this year, what I would do is I would think of January 4th, 2022. So I would add 1 plus 4, again, that's 5, plus 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 2. And 2022 equals 6. So 6 plus 5 is 11. So my life path or my card of the year is an 11. So the 11 card is Justice. Now you can break that even further down to add the 1 and 1 together and get a 2. And the 2 is the High Priestess. So we have Justice and the High Priestess. They have very similar stances on their cards. They look the same, they're kind of sitting in these thrones. They have pillars next to them. And so that's kind of that energy for how you figure out your life path card. Now, when Kira and I were talking, we were talking about America and what would we use? We used July 4th. So that's a 7 and a 4, 1776, or July 4th, 2022. So July would be a 7 plus the 4 is 11 plus 6 is the year. So 11 plus 6 is 17. And the 17 card is the Star. So you can break that down. So 17 is an 8. So the Strength or the Star. So did I get that right? I feel like we talked about something else, but yeah, okay. No, sorry. 17 is that an 8? Yeah, it is an 8. Oh my gosh. It's maybe too late to record. Thank you for your question. So if you want to figure it out, you're adding your month, your day, and the present year. And that's a great way to like think about like, okay, you have a special date coming up, you can figure out the card, that like that'll bring the archetype energy. So I hope that helps. Okay, bye. So Allie asked me some amazing questions, and I just want to get to each one of them because I think they're so juicy and interesting, but I'm going to take one at a time. So these are all from Allie, who I absolutely adore. So let's start with the first one. Tell us more about your call, vocation, and why you chose to study with whom you did. So I have a number of I have a number of callings. And so when I went to college, I actually went for film. And I went for film because I wanted to I went for radio, television, film because I wanted to be a journalist and I wanted to do documentaries because I am obsessed with documentaries and I love storytelling. And I particularly love storytelling when it comes to like presenting information that people might not um, have that empathy, like I'm really interested in the empathy gap and how to close it. um, so I think that storytelling is a really wonderful way to do that. When I went to film school, I realized like I just really wanted to write and tell those stories and talk about those stories. So I ended up like leaving school for a while and just traveling and living elsewhere and then coming back to school and as a journalism major. And my first semester back, I was, older. I wasn't like ancient. I was like 25, but everybody was, 18 coming out of college and they're coming out of high school. Sorry. And I was in a class for religion, American religion. And I got my first paperback, which I was really nervous because I hadn't been in school in a while. Now, I had been working as, doing writing and creative writing and poetry and trying to get all that stuff published. But so I had been writing the whole time, but the note on the paper just said, "See me in my office." And I went to this guy's office and he was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, I don't, I mean, I really thought I was in trouble. And he was like, "What is your major?" And I said, "Journalism." He's like, "Why are you a journalism major?" And I said, "Because I want to write." He said, "You're an excellent writer. Like, I've never gotten a paper like this." And he said, "But why don't you find something you love? Because you don't need help writing. You need to figure out what you love to study." And I realized what I love to study is I was really interested in faith and prayer and why people pray, why they worship the way they worship, how they worship. I loved mythology and stories of the universe. I also find I find a nugget of beauty and relevance and truth in all of them. And so I switched my major that day. He actually got me into the honors program. That guy changed the trajectory of my life with that one comment, which I am forever grateful for him. And he is one of the amazing professors I got to study with at Temple University, which has a really good religion department. And so I studied comparative religion, and I had the distinct honor to study with David Watt, who is the one who did that. But I also studied with John Raines. He was one of my mentors, and Khalid Blankenship. So I studied religion, Christianity, Judaism. Ancient Greek religion was a really big part of what I ended up being really interested in, and the intersection between ancient Greek religion and early Christianity, and um, kind of like the history of like how the movements and religions influenced each other. So I also studied with Dr. Katie Cannon, and Dr. John Raines, who he died recently and came out right before he died, was one of the Weathermen Underground, and he was a freedom writer, and he was an amazing person. Like, he honestly was another person that changed the trajectory of my life because he really helped me formulate and understand who I was. And he encouraged me. He was just like one of those people that's like, everything is open to you. And I loved him because he was so gentle and kind. So my studies synthesized years of my own personal searching for my spirituality and experiencing different religions and religious experiences. I was raised Catholic. My mother emigrated from Panama to the United States. My father was, he was born in the United States, but he comes from like coal mining Irish people. um, so I had a really interesting childhood because of that. But they were also like 18 in 1968. So they had this sensibility that was like very hippie influence. They weren't hippies. They worked really hard at just having like a middle class life, I think. Or I don't want that to sound bad, but my parents were both raised in poverty, so they both really worked hard. But so I didn't have the spirituality. My parents weren't like super uber Catholic. They weren't like, shaming in the Catholic way. I mean, they made me go to church and do CCD, so that's shaming in of itself. But anyway, I was introduced to like very mystical experiences, mystical music. My parents were into crystals. I mean, I started meditating at a very young age, and my parents were always like my mom had an ancestor altar, and um, talked about the angels and the saints and blah, 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 blah. But I learned a lot of things about different religions. And in that way, I really had not had like a intense spiritual experience yet. And religion is really multidisciplinary. It's not like theology where you're like just studying. What we say is, in religion, we study what people think of God. In theology, you study what God thinks of people. And so we really study archaeology, philosophy, history, psychology, social justice, liberation, anthropology. And we do study theology and philosophy like together, but as a scholar, not as a believer. So I really took a lot of different courses. I took a lot of anthropology and medical, particularly medical and biological anthropology courses. So I studied healing in those. And all through this time, like I'm in my 20s, so I had started like being in meditation groups, like at Buddhist centers from the time I was like 17, 18. And then, would go to like different retreats. I moved to Arizona. I got married, and my first husband is Native American. He's black. He's Mexican. He's an amazing human being, but also he exposed me to um, the desert, and that is where I felt spiritually like, oh my gosh, this is where I belong. And I had some profound experiences that were spiritual. So, um, all this seems really disconnected to what I do now, but in my studies, I had always been a seeker, like trying to find that seed of faith within myself. And I, had been invited to lots of houses of worship and studied with lots of different religions, but I couldn't quite find my own faith. And I think that, what really, and this sounds funny, but what changed was that I got sober. And when I got sober, I had to like get on my knees and ask Great Spirit to help me stay sober. And so that God gene was activated at a very young age, but it didn't really spread in my body and get into my DNA until I was much older. I got sober at 37. So I had been searching and doing all this stuff, like seeing psychics and doing healings. And, I'd always read tarot, but um, all that is to say, how did I choose to study with whom I started studying? Well, what happened was I moved to New Jersey. I went after I had babies because I was living in Philly. So I went from the desert to Philly at some point. And there I met Rita Strout. Now she's I consider her my first real spiritual mentor. She taught me how to protect myself. She's the Reiki master that attuned me. And she had a meditation group called Meditating with the Angels or Harmonic Healing with the Angels. And I would go every month. She had it once a month. And that opened me up so much, so much. And then, and part of it was that people were taking me, um, like from people in recovery would be like, we're going to this spiritual thing, like this woman channels angels. And I'd be like, okay, cool. And I'll go with you, And so we had gone to a couple people's experiences like that. And that's when I really started researching and going down the deep dives of like, what is this? Oh my gosh, this has been happening to me my whole life. So Rita Strout was my first real mentor in terms of my spiritual gifts and opening me up psychically. And I was, like I said, I always read tarot. So she was the one who was just like, give me a tarot reading. And I did. And she was like, that was amazing. And she's the first person that ever paid me. She's the first person that like pushed me out of the nest, I guess I could say. And then I studied with Pixie Lighthorse. At the time, she had something called Soul Lodge, and it was just when I started, she had a Facebook community, and she would do teachings. And the year I signed up, which I feel like it was 2012, she kind of like changed it so that every month you would get a different animal to work with and do a journey with and deep dive with. And so I spent a year doing that, like just do it. And I didn't really have much one-to-one interaction with Pixie at all. And then the next year she did boundaries and protection for the first time. She did gold mining the shadow. She did voice with Raven. I did everything she offered. I just loved working with her. And the reason that I loved working with her is because she was very grounded in psychology. She was very grounded in um, understanding the psyche. And it wasn't all woo woo, was talking about shadow work and how we spiritually work with these things like trauma and how we spiritually work with um, illness or, those sort of things. And I just was like, I wished she would do a certification. And then in 2015, she started her certification. So her first Soul Lodge Earth Medicine School class I was in every single level for the first time. So I did one, two, three, and four. And that's where I really became uh, more intimate with Pixie. And we had this group of people that went through all four of the levels together. And I started going to Oregon and doing the Soul Lodge medicine gatherings, which she doesn't do this work anymore, but she studied for a long time with Irene Scow. And so she just had an amazing grounding. And Pixie is Choctaw, and she taught from her perspective and also her teachers. And so it was really good. And the one thing that Pixie does that I loved, which is open you up to your own culture and really get in touch with who you are and what your people do and all of that. And that's why I was really, really attracted to working with Pixie. Uh, Around the same time, like 2012, is when I started working with Hibiscus Moon. And what had happened was I went to massage school because I had a vision actually in a yoga retreat that I was working on the body. And I thought that was massage. So I went to massage school. And honestly, I don't talk about this a lot, but I was doing great in massage school. I loved it. I, I liked doing massage. Um, but I think, I was really not comfortable working on being worked on. I still had a lot of trauma that I hadn't even touched. So being naked every day in front of your colleagues to get massaged was very, very difficult for me. I had a lot of trauma around that. And um, one of the times that happened, uh, someone fat shamed me and said, like, I don't know how to work on you without touching your fat. And I was like, I'm done here. Like, these people aren't spiritual. This isn't like what I want to do. And I went home and I said, I can't go back there. And so I dropped out of massage school and I used that money that I had put into massage school to go to Hibiscus Moon Crystal Academy and get certified as a crystal practitioner. Now, my sister and I used to lay crystals on each other's bodies, just like playing for fun. Hibiscus Moon was amazing. It was like, she was up and running for 2 years or something at that point. Um, and so I had some one on one interaction with her. And I, of course, loved her. And then I graduated and went right to ACM. And my final in ACM, I wrote an article, and part of the article, we write articles. The article I wrote was about a case study I had done of helping someone detach from a past life contract that they had. And I got it published in a crystal magazine and stuff. And I remember her reaching out to me like, you adapted the work that we did. This is exactly what I want, kind of thing. And so when she was looking for coaches, she asked me and like 9 other people, interviewed them to become crystal coaches. And she chose me. And that's when I started intimately working with her as one of her coaches, meaning I answer questions for students and stuff like that. So she put that trust in me to be able to like know our material really, really well. And I know it head to toe, but working with her one on one, like she is so genuine and so kind. So I consider my mentors to be Rita Strauss, Pixie Lighthorse, and Hibiscus Moon. And I've been very, very blessed to have really good mentors. And it's been an amazing journey. And I've done other studies, like I've done some other work. I'm currently working on my herbalism. Um, so I'm working on with Rosemary Gladstar's program, and I don't have any one-on-one interaction with her. But I'm loving the material. Okay, my next question comes from Allie. What are your thoughts on the unregulated nature of holistic healing and the wellness community and how you strike a balance between freedom and ethics? I take ethics and in the integrity in energy work, in tarot, in shamanic work very, very seriously. So I have very mixed feelings about this. We don't have a governing body, so there is no way to really regulate holistic healing and the wellness community unless it was from like a governmental oversight, which I think would be a disaster. It needs to be a governing community by energy workers for energy workers, or a governing body for tarot by tarot. Right now there's no place where clients can go if they have had an unethical experience with a healer or a practitioner or a tarot reader. Um, they can write reviews on Yelp or whatever, which most of us don't even have Yelp, you know, um, but there's no place, for complaints. There's no place to strip some of it of a license. Someone can just rebrand and go across town, or it's kind of a wild west right now of wellness work. So I am very, very passionate about ethics. I am actually teaching an ethics class. It's called Holding Space Ethics and Trauma Informed Crystal Therapy, and I'm teaching it through Hibiscus Moon Crystal Academy. It's really, really important to me, and there's a lot of amazing energy workers that are doing ethics work and teaching ethics. I was definitely taught really strong ethics by Pixie Lighthorse, one of my mentors. Definitely Rita, when she attuned me to Reiki, gave me a kind of ethical framework for my Reiki practice. No sneaky Reiki, no, no giving without permission, and those kind of things. She really, really stressed. And I'm very, very grateful for having mentors who took ethics very seriously. And of course, Hibiscus Moon does. She's allowing me to teach this class. Um, on the other hand, and I should say, there are like some of those leaders in the community, like Donna Eden, who has her Eden energy system. She has a really wonderful book on ethics that I think is great. But I don't think we talk enough about sort of the Venn diagram of healing, and which is like we have psychology over here, we have energy work over here, and there's a lot of overlap. We have allopathic medicine and energy work, and there's a lot of overlap. And so that's where the unregulated part of our community can really suffer, because you have people who are kind of diving into the therapeutic realm who don't have a degree in therapy, who don't have any ethical um, oversight, and so they're doing stuff like giving like pseudo therapy by doing quote unquote shadow work, for example, with people who and they've never been trained in it. So holding space for trauma and those kind of things without training is very, very scary to me. So, you know, it's interesting. Kira and I talked about ethics in one of my previous podcasts because she is a therapist, and we kind of talked about some of this Wild West part of our community. So for me, I strike a balance by saying I do have a code of ethics. I have it very clearly stated on my website. I have, basically my scope of practice. I have informed consent. I tell you exactly what's happening in every session, how much it costs is right on my website. I don't hide any of that. And that's, I think, really important. So there are a number of things I think, at least, having some kind of code of ethics and printing them out and showing them to people, or having them, in your studio or on your website is really important. And my oversight, I don't have someone in a supervisory position. I don't have credentialed from somewhere that would get complaints about me necessarily, but I have not, thankfully, had any complaints in terms of ethics. So, but I would love to see something come up that makes sense for our community and the varied, that's a problem. You might have a Reiki oversight. You might have a sound healing modality that has oversight, like Hibiscus Moon has a signed code of ethics, and we could get stripped of our CCP, our certified crystal practitioner designation, if we don't follow that. But we don't get complaints about practitioners really. I don't, not that I know of, have we ever stripped anybody of their uh, letters. Um, so anyway, that's kind of my quick thought. And then Allie's last question is, I received your Reiki virtually and find it absolutely stunning how incredibly potent it is despite it being online. Do you ever find it to be as surprising distance healing? And thank you for what you do. You're a blessing to so many. Thank you, Allie. That was so sweet. I do find it surprising. I always have this kind of moment. It's usually a moment or two where I'm like, oh my gosh, what if this doesn't work? And I have to be like, that's my ego trying to like jump in, and talk me out of doing this thing. And it's very human concerns of like looking like a fool or our reputation being tarnished. And in many ways, it's the work that we have as healers and practitioners is getting beyond our own ego concerns and doing what we do and trusting that it's going to work because so when I connect, I can really feel it, and my clients really feel it too. It is profoundly transformative for me when I get to see that happen, and I just feel like I have a glimpse of how amazing and mysterious this world is by doing distance healing. And I've worked with people all over the world, and I have, I had a client in New Zealand, and so that's basically on the other side of the world, and it still worked, and that's what's just mind blowing. So yeah, it still surprises me. Allie asked this question: what are your favorite offerings and where do you hope to grow in your practice? My favorite offerings, honestly, teaching is at the top of my list. I love doing one on one work, especially doing like shamanic crystal healing work, like kind of combining the Reiki, the shamanic work, and the crystal healing. And now that's basically all I offer. Um, I get a little more drained doing tarot work, and that's because I'm talking the whole time. And um, I do love just doing hands-on healing. Um, there's not, I mean, I just go into another zone, where I hope to grow in my practice. I probably at some point will stop seeing one-on-one clients and just move into teaching. I'd love to have an academy where I have other practitioners, um, and have circles and things like that that are virtual. So my day job is Hibiscus Moon Crystal Academy. I work for them as the curriculum specialist. That's closing at the end of the year, so I'm really going to put all my eggs in that basket of teaching online and broadening my community, and just kind of spreading out my wings in that way. Another of my favorite offerings is to offer circles. Like, I love doing my mentoring circle, one of my favorite things to do. Also, just circling people up for moon cycles and stuff. I might be doing more of that as well in 2023 because I've really missed doing that. And I stopped circling in 2020 with COVID. And I just miss it so much. That is so fulfilling. And just kind of passing on that knowledge is really important. That's something from recovery, is like you have to pass it on to keep it, this idea that we have to continue teaching and showing people. So I'd love to like be able to certify hands-on healers for shamanic work and crystal healing at some point. And then just doing circles, retreats. I did my first retreat last year and I just absolutely loved it. That was so much fun. So those are kind of places I'd love to grow to, but yeah. So Maria asked, where would one go to study shamanism? Is it all possible to do it long distance if travel costs are an issue? How long did you actively study? I would imagine you, as all of us, are lifelong learners, students. Love you and love all you do. Thank you, Maria. Um, yeah, I feel like a lifelong learner. So a lot of people study shamanism with a teacher who studied with a teacher who studied um, with a traditional healer of some kind in some, culture. So the original Western shamanic practitioners, most of them studied with Michael Harner, who was an anthropologist who studied healers and shamanic healing in Central and South America. And so there are a lot of healers, shamanic healers that came out of his school. And he basically taught core shamanism, which is shamanism in the West, basically for personal development. Shamanic work was basically considered traditional healing work. And the shamanic healer in a tribe, say in the Amazon, was the healer for the entire community. He was selected by the community, probably as a child, or sometimes they would have an accident or an illness that gave them visions to the other side, and they would be selected and trained as the practitioner, the shamanic healer for the community. Or it would be lineage. So there are a lot of anthropologists, not a lot, but there are a number of them and ethnobotanists that went to Central and South America studying traditional shamanic work, healing, and then came and taught it to people in the United States or people abroad. Um, but there are many cultures that have traditional healers. I'm thinking there's like Celtic shamanism, there's, basically Scandinavian shamanism, or, uh, looking at the Sami, who are still in existence and still do so many of the same practices. There's traditional healing in Asia, and basically the word shaman comes from the Mongolian. So there are traditional shamanic healers in Mongolia. Then there's traditional healers in Africa, and the Yoruban tradition is a big one, especially through the Americas. So there's many places to study different kinds of shamanic healing, and many people think like even voodoo or voodoo is shamanic healing, and Santeria and things like this. Like there are so it's kind of funny to like have this overbranching idea of shamanism when it's really like traditional healing, and it looks like different things from different places, and many of the different places have the same structure, even though they might do it slightly differently. So, where can you study? Right now, one of the bigger schools is the Four Winds Society, which is run by Alberto Violdo and his wife. Oh gosh, what is her name? Lobos. Lobo is her last name. Her last name is Wolf in Spanish. And they teach more like Peruvian, Quechuan shamanism from South America. And you can get trained with them like all over the country. And then there are different shamanic teachers, that are still teaching, but they're a little few and far between. Many people are moving away from this kind of Michael Harner school of shamanism, core shamanism, because of the cultural appropriation part of it, even though many of those anthropologists were welcomed into the tribe and taught and asked to pass on the teachings. There's a lot of criticism right now coming from them. So there's a lot of people that are saying keep these traditions within their traditions. And so you find different words being used instead of shamanic, like transformative is a big one. Like on my website, I try to use transformative as much as possible. Shamanism and shamanic work is a shorthand for me. so that you know what I'm talking about. Traditional healing, the healing of the earth. And I was trained as an earth medicine practitioner, not as a shamanic practitioner. So that I need to make clear too, because I talk about shamanism a lot, because that's how I was trained. And yet my teacher now is kind of like distancing herself from that word and from that idea of having taught, of not her having taught. She's not distancing herself from that, but like some of that stuff, I think she probably doesn't want to teach anymore, because some of it is culturally appropriative. So, at any rate, there's a lot of places to go. So Googling shamanic teachers is a really easy way to start finding them. But, I think like looking within a tradition that resonates for you is probably important. So, looking at your cultural background and what teachers are teaching from that tradition. So the next question you had was, is it possible to do it long distance? Absolutely. Shamanic work was specifically for not long distance work, but like there isn't a ton of hands-on healing. It's not cutting open the body. It's working on the energy body. And in that way, you don't need to be in the same room because energy transcends time and space and all that stuff. So that's a big deal, we do a lot of long distance work. In fact, the work I sometimes prefer to do is to drop into Journey and get what I'm getting and then share it with my client later, instead of them always being right there, because I can just drop into Journey and do my thing. But yeah, it's totally fine to do it online. I love doing it that way. And then you asked, how long did I actively study? So I did my own work for a long time. Not a long time. Okay, from 2012 until I started taking classes was 3 years, and I was doing Shamanic Journey a number of times a month, and studying the different animals and things like that. My teacher was very, very much stressed, do your own work first before you work on others. So that was a big deal for me. So I worked on my own stuff for a long time. And then I got trained as a crystal practitioner, and that was the earth medicine portion. So I was already doing hands-on work on people, and then doing my own work in shamanic studies and with her in earth medicine, which of course the umbrella of earth medicine has crystals under it. So, slowly as I was studying with Pixie, and I started doing Soul Lodge Earth Medicine School in 2015. And every year I did another level. So I did 4 years of Soul Lodge Earth Medicine School, and just continued to read and study and work on all those things. But I had a couple of teachers in there. Pixie was the most important one. And slowly as I was working on people, I would get messages to start, drumming over the person or dropping into Journey and being shown what to do. And that's kind of how I incorporate that shamanic work into my day-to-day work. So thanks for your question. Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.